to worship on this fine, foggy January day. Wonderful day to be inside and celebrate God's presence in our midst. I will invite you to maybe rise if you'd like or not. We're going to sing Take Me to the Water. If you choose to support this ministry, there are baskets in the back to do that. There are two. There's one for our general.
And we will pass the basket out.
Okay. Yeah, there's one for general and one for just if you want to help out with fixing up the building when it needs it, maintaining the building. And after our speaker, we will pass a separate basket if you would like to support Makoche Ikuchupe. And you'll hear more about that later. Okay? We will have Tai Chi Fit this Wednesday, weather permitting and health permitting and all of that stuff at 6 o'clock p.m. Meetings coming up January 25th at 6 o'clock. We have Safe Space Group, and at 6:30 there is a support group for parents and friends of LGBTQ plus folk. 7th of February, 6:45, Faith Enrichment, and on February 15th, 6:30, there is council. A reminder that next Sunday is our annual meeting, so please plan to stay after the meeting. And as soon as Julie gets my report, she'll get an annual report to you. Bad timing on leaving, I guess. So, finally, if you want to do any volunteering in this church does not run unless people volunteer to do all the little things. So if you'd like to do that, sign up on the clipboards in the entryway for, something as simple as just clicking the clicker on a Sunday morning. All sorts of other things that you can chip in with. Are there other announcements to be made this morning? If not, let's move on with our call to worship.
Please join me in the call to worship. Blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into being.
Blessed is the one who creates the world.
Blessed is the one who speaks and does.
Blessed is the one who decrees and
Blessed is the one who has compassion for the earth.
Blessed is the one who has compassion for all creatures.
Blessed is the one who lives eternally and exists forever.
Blessed is the Holy One.
Stand and sing with me, please. Spirit of Jesus, if I love my neighbor, out of my mouth, lead me to power well. Open my mind to understand the anger of endlessness that leads my power to hell. And if I have answered with kindness, my neighbor rises, wakened from despair. Open my heart to hear the cry for justice that struggles for the changes that I fear. If I am not in safety or possessions, uncurl my spirit as your love prevails. To join my neighbor's work for liberation and find my freedom at the mark of nails. Take a deep breath. With every breath, breathe in God's love and breathe out your fear. With every breath, know that you come from God and you return to God. With every breath, know that you are loved and you love one another. Breathe deep, for the Spirit is in you. Amen. You may be seated.
Our scripture reading today is from Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 through 4. But there will be no gloom for those who were in anguish. In the former time he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time he will make glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. You have multiplied the nation, you have increased its joy. They rejoice before you, and as with joy at the harvest, as people exult when dividing plunder. For the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian.
So shortly after I arrived here in Hutchinson at New Journey, what was First Congregational then, I got this little pamphlet in the mail about a group called Makoche Ikichupe, and I hope I'm pronouncing that kind of close even. We invited John to come and talk to us about what that organization was about. For me, it's exciting because it is a partnership for reconciliation and restoration that it goes beyond the old charity of my childhood and brings us closer to an equal balance of power and an equal respect for one another. And so I'm really excited about what's been happening since John came before. And I want to invite John. He would prefer to be down here so he can see what's going on the slides. And I'm going to come down there. And thank you very much for being here, John.
Thank you, Jill.
Is it on?
Is it on?
There.
Okay, I just have to be close.
Yes.
Before I get into the presentation, I'd like to say just a couple of comments. One is a practical consideration. It is this. It is unrealistic to return all the land, but it is unjust to return none of the land. I'll say that again. It's very simple. It is unrealistic to return all of the land, but it is unjust to return none of the land. And then a little bit about my history. In 2012, a little bit more than 10 years ago, my family decided to settle my grandparents' farm near my hometown, Mountain Lake, Minnesota, where I live today, helping my mom there. That's in southwestern Minnesota. And I had to decide what to do. And I decided okay, is that better? That is better. Thank you, Jill. So I decided to return half the proceeds from my share as one of the grandchildren to indigenous communities working for land justice, most to Makoche, which means land recovery in the Dakota language. Sometimes I just say Dakota land recovery. Why half? I thought about the example of Zacchaeus, the very wealthy tax collector. You will remember Zacchaeus was a weedy little man who had dinner with Jesus and decided to return half his wealth to the poor and 4 times as much to anyone that he personally defrauded. And I thought, this is the Zacchaeus principle. If you benefit from an unjust system and you decide to follow the love ethic of Jesus, then you must make restitution to those oppressed by that system. And I thought the land was taken unjustly for the benefit of settlers and their descendants like me. So I decided to return half. So let's get into the presentation. When I was here 6 or 7 years ago, it was theoretical. This now is practical. This is how it happens. So a 3-part presentation. First, a timeline about Makoche Ichubi, this Dakota organization. Second, about repair communities. These communities of white people who are acting in repair. I'll talk about what that means and where those are. And highlights of 2022. So let's go ahead. By the way, I think this will not take more than 15 minutes, maybe a little less. So there will be time for questions and discussion. Okay? Thank you. So this is a timeline of Dakota land recovery. Minnesota Makoche, which means land where the waters reflect the sky, where the sky reflects the water, excuse me, is Dakota homeland. We are on Dakota homeland. In 2008, Dr. Wazia Tumbi, she has her PhD, published her book, What Does Justice Look Like? The Struggle for Liberation in Dakota Homeland. And in that book, she argued for land reparations. The next year, 2009, the Dakota Land Recovery Project was born with an evening of reparations in the Twin Cities area, sponsored by white settler activists who had read her book and decided to contribute to the recovery of Dakota land. And in that evening of reparations, they raised, I believe, $16,000, and that was the beginning of the Dakota Land Recovery Project. So that was 2009. White Minnesotans are now making reparations for Dakota land recovery in several ways, including returning back rent, meaning I have lived and made my living on Dakota land for a very long time. What do I owe in terms of back rent? Second, returning a portion of land or real estate sales. Third, returning the amount of property taxes. Some churches have looked at this and asked, how much would our church owe in property taxes if we owe property taxes? And they have paid that amount or a portion of that amount. Fourth, putting reparations in wills or estates. And fifth, deeding land over to Makoche Ikichupi. Before you do that, check with Makoche Ikichupi to see if they want it. In 2015, Makoche Ikichupi became a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Before it was a part of another nonprofit organization. With three aspects: return of Dakota land, revitalization of Dakota culture, and renewal of the environment. In 2019, Makoche Ikichupi purchased its first parcel of land, 21 acres in the Minnesota River Valley near Granite Falls. And they began constructing 3 earth lodges on that land until an inspector with the state of Minnesota issued a stop work order saying this building is not in compliance with Minnesota state building and fire codes. So for 2 years, the organization and allies lobbied the state government for a waiver to the building codes, to the fire codes, for indigenous people to build according to their cultural traditions. The waiver says you still have to get permission from the person in charge of the building codes and the person in charge of the fire codes, but you don't have to follow the building codes and fire codes, which are really meant for Western ways of building. If you actually look at the earth lodges, they are far more solid, far more likely to survive a tornado than the houses that most of us live in. So, in 2021, they resumed construction on the 3 earth lodges, have a water line, 2 outdoor compost outhouses, cook shelter, and the beginning of permaculture planting. By 2021, the first Earth Lodge was completed. This is Dr. Waz in the doorway of that first Earth Lodge. Let's see, did I? Oh, no, that's okay. By 2025, just a couple of years from now, they hope to have 7 Earth Lodges completed, their permaculture design well underway, and to have 6 Oshedi Shakowi families living in those Earth Lodges. The main Earth Lodge would be for communal gatherings. And they call the village Zani Otuwe, which means Village of Wellness. So that's the plan. 3 of the Earth Lodges are completed. 1 family is living there. Another family plans to move in this spring. So they're on their way. By 2050, the plan is to have 10 more village sites in Minnesota, Makoche. These would include gardening and foraging lands, fishing and wild ricing lands, and sugar bush lands. Sugar bushing means production of maple syrup. Now I'm going to go on to the repair communities. A couple of years ago, we decided that Makoche Chupi has issued an invitation for allies, for white allies, to help with the building. Basically, what they said over their website was, if you can swing a hammer, if you can plant a tree, if you can build a compost outhouse, if you can cook a meal, we could use your help. So we responded to that request by forming repair communities in my hometown, Mountain Lake, in the Twin Cities, and in Rochester. This year, we would like to form a repair community in central Minnesota. That includes Hutchinson, Wilmer, New London, this area that we are in. By repair, we mean 3 things. Repair for stolen Dakota land, repair for destruction of Dakota culture, and repair for environmental devastation. And we can identify 4 methods of making repair. Financial reparations, like back rent, donating time and labor at Zanyotuwe, at the first village, shifting our worldview, our values about nature, and advocating for legislative change. And the repair communities accordingly are engaged in 4 kinds of activities: volunteer work days, reflection hours, usually monthly, back rent campaign, that's our fundraising, legislative action, which we are just starting this year. So here's a picture of a work day on October 9th, 2021. This was our first work day. You see scraping bark. Each of these earth lodges probably has 200 logs in it. There's a lot of scraping bark that is involved. You don't have to have any skill like me to scrape bark. And construction. So these are people putting planks on the roof of the first earth lodge, the main earth lodge. Oops, I'll go back there. So this is the interior of the main earth lodge. It's large. If you look in the back, I don't know if you can see, there are 2 queen-size beds there. There are 13 sections in each earth lodge. In other words, around the sides, there's room for 13 queen-size beds in one earth lodge. Why 13? In the Dakota calendar, which is a lunar calendar, there are 13 lunar months of 28 days, plus 1 day for the birth of the universe. That's 365 days. So that's 13. That's why there are 13 sections. Also, all turtles have 13 sections on their shells. So earth lodges are built to be in harmony and balance with nature. Our reflection hours are focused on the struggle against the systems of white supremacy, or if you prefer, the structures of colonization, including the politics of white supremacy and land theft. Think about the doctrine of discovery. Think about the treaties, which really are about land swindles. The culture of white supremacy and the destruction of indigenous cultures. Think about the boarding schools. The economics of white supremacy and environmental devastation. What's the link there? For indigenous peoples, including Dakota people, land was considered common and sacred. The Europeans brought the notion of land, and actually all of nature, being an economic commodity to be bought and sold. That's the link between economics and environmental devastation. And then with the Twin Cities Repair Community, we recently launched a back rent campaign. And we have 28 households or individuals involved in this. Together, they are returning $1,760 a month in back rent, which amounts to $21,100 a year. And finally, legislative action. After 2 years of lobbying, Governor Walz signed a law that allows for a waiver for indigenous people to build according to their culture. I already talked about that. So that was a success. Now, there is a proposal for a law that each time real estate is sold in the state of Minnesota, a small fee, 0.0005, that's 5/10,000ths of the sale price, be attached to the sale, the proceeds of which would support programs determined by the natives of Minnesota. This bill has been written, and the hope is, if not this legislative session, next legislative session, to pass that bill. So what does that mean? What that means is if you sell a piece of land or real estate for $10,000, $5 would be taken for this program. There would be a $5 fee for this program. There are some highlights of 2022, last year. These are from a presentation that Wazia Tumi did for a joint session, a joint Zoom session of the repair communities. So these are screen captures here. So you see Wazia Tumi's picture up there. She's talking. This slide was there. So there are gatherings of Dakota, Lakota, Nakota people at Zani-Otumai, at this first village. 2 of them, one in the spring, one in the fall, with 4 or 5 dozen people coming each time. These are people who want to see the village, Ochedi Shakomi people who want to see the village and are considering maybe we would like to live in one of these villages. Let's see, how did I do that? A place for processing traditional foods. Here they're processing sweet corn for a kind of soup that they make. The first baby was born in the main Earth Lodge at Zani Utuwa. This was in August. This is a picture of the mother and the child. Waz said it felt like this was the first baby born on liberated Dakota land in Minnesota. Harvesting wild rice. Dakota people were invited to a place on Lake Minnetonka to harvest wild rice. Waz said this is the first time that she is engaged in harvest, in wild rice in her life. And near the end of last year, they acquired the property for their second village near Mountain Lake. It's actually in Mountain Lake, my hometown. This is a building there and an organic farm that for years has been dedicated to vegetable, fruit, and nut production. And the owners donated the land in Makoche Uchupi, paid for the building. And so we had a fundraising campaign and raised enough money to help Makoche purchase the building. So this will be a gardening location. That building actually has a greenhouse on the other side, so they can raise vegetables year-round. Has solar panels, so it's all powered by solar. And has a place for processing and storing the food. So that's the end of my presentation. These are the things that have been happening, practical things that have been happening over the past couple of years, over the past several years, since last I talked here. So I'll open it up for whatever comments or questions you might have. Go ahead.
On this organic farm, who are the workers? Who are the farmers?
The plan there is also to have several earth lodges built for perhaps 5 or 6 Dakota families. So they would be the primary workers there. The first of those families has already volunteered. Their names are Linda and Luke Blackout. Linda is an ethnobotanist, basically someone whose her specialty is in indigenous uses of plants. And so she has that expertise. Her husband is a practitioner of Dakota ways, particularly expert in Dakota spirituality, and a chef. They are good friends with Sean Sherman. You may have heard of the sous chef in Minneapolis and his restaurant there. And he has already said, I will buy from you all the squash and all the beans, all the indigenous beans you can produce. So that's there. Linda and Luke are planning to move to Mountain Lake, and we're planning to build the first earth lodge there so Linda and Luke can live there in late May. Linda is a college teacher at Sitting Bull College in North Dakota. Once her teaching duties are finished in May, she'll move there. And eventually there will be 4 or 5 other families living there, and they will be the primary workers. But we are excited as the Mountain Lake Repair community to be able to help with planting and weeding and harvesting and whatever. And eventually there will be a Dakota restaurant here, like there is in the Twin Cities. And Luke will be the chef. We're really excited about that. We have our first volunteer work day there on February 4. And so Luke and Linda and a couple of other people from the Coach are coming down. We are going to be doing preparing the soil and doing the plantings in the greenhouse. And so, we've been asked for 10 volunteers with our gardening experience, which, Mountain Lake is a food production area, so there are lots of folks with experience. To join with the, 4 or 5 Dakota people that come down to do that planting work. So it's a partnership, but like the village, Zaniotuwe, 90% of the work is done by Dakota people. Probably 10% or so is done by white allies who are invited in. It's not a tourist destination. Don't go there to see it. If you want to go there, join a repair community, participate in a work there. If you think I'm too old to work, that's okay. We welcome elders to come and do whatever they can or not. But, anyone in the repair communities is welcome on the work days. It's a long answer. Hope it was useful.
What is useful? Is the goal to become sustainable, 100% sustainable?
The goal is to become 100% sustainable with a network of these 10 or 11 villages. So some would provide the fish, and there's some discussion about obtaining more land there, and where there could be a few buffalo there. This year, Makoche Ikichupi is participating in a buffalo kill and butcher in South Dakota. So they will have, meat from that. And of course, they get fruits and vegetables and nuts from these gardens here. Eventually, wild rice and fish and other plants. The earth lodges are basically off-grid. They're like living in a cave because they're completely covered with earth. So they are cool in the summer, and they don't get cold in the winter. Each earth lodge has one wood stove. That wood stove is enough to keep it pretty warm, even when it's 20 degrees below outside. So, you don't have to be hooked up to, the heating or electrical systems in order to live in an earth lodge a fairly comfortable life. And the ideal is, some people say this is nostalgia for the past. In a way it is, but it is mostly an ethical commitment to live in harmony and balance with nature. Yes?
I'm wondering if there's recreation projects in the Dakotas or in other parts of the country where other tribes have also lost a lot of land?
There should be all over the United States. In some cases, there are. There is a similar organization in Alabama, which actually is larger. They've been at it longer, and they have wealthy benefactors. We have benefactors, but I wouldn't call our benefactors really wealthy on the scale of the Alabama benefactors. Anyway, in South Dakota, there's a similar organization to Makoche Ikichupi called Yisto, and they recently received a large donation from a sale of land there to buy 30 acres and begin construction on their first earth lodge. So they're kind of a partner organization to Makoche Ikichupi, but in South Dakota. And they're not as far along as Makoche is. The one in Alabama is much farther along than Makoche. There are other places where government entities have actually returned land to indigenous communities or nations. I better not say exactly because I get it wrong. But you've heard about the land back movement. So this is, Makoche Ikuchubi is part of the land back movement, both through private reparations, like when my family sold my grandparents' farm, part of the proceeds were returned to Makoche Ikuchubi. Now I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. They also have returned part of their proceeds to Makoche Ikuchubi. So this is a growing thing. But it's very hard to return much land only through private reparations. That's why we're looking for legislative change, so that this small fee would be attached every time land or real estate was sold in the state of Minnesota. That money would go perhaps to Makoche Ikuchubi, but also to Dakota and Ojibwe or Anishinaabe tribes or organizations in the state. And the legislation provides for a group of indigenous people to make decisions about where the money would go. Anyway, so reparations is happening. Yes?
What is your relationship with other Dakota tribes in Minnesota?
Little bit of history, and you probably know this. In 1863, the governor of Minnesota at that time, Alexander Ramsey, said this in a speech before the Minnesota legislature. The Dakota people shall be exterminated or removed forever beyond the boundaries of the state. And that happened. There were bounties put on Dakota heads, Dakota scalps, they called them redskins. There's large cash payments. And Dakota people were forced, all Dakota people were forced out of the state of Minnesota. So today there are 4 tiny, tiny reservations, Dakota reservations in Minnesota, not like the large Ojibwe reservations in the north. So one, the Upper Sioux, near Granite Falls, one, the Lower Sioux Reservation, one Shakopee, and one, it slips my mind. But they're all tiny, and they're all basically a result of Dakota people from the Dakotas returning and buying land for their own communities. I mean, it's strange, we think about reservations being, the state or federal government giving land. Well, they stole the land and then they gave some of it back. But the state of Minnesota has never given land for Dakota reservations in the state. So most Dakota people who have ancestors from Minnesota, well, Dr. Watt says, live in exile. They live in South Dakota, they live in North Dakota, they live in Canada. And part of what Makoche Ikuchubi does is make it possible for these Dakota people with ancestors in Minnesota to return to their own land. Yes?
On the land that is donated or purchased, is that still subject to state property tax?
It's probably a complex answer. Makoche Ikuchubi itself is a nonprofit organization. So like a church, it does not pay property tax on that land, as long as the land is used for purposes consistent with the nonprofit charter or purpose. But in the case, for example, of the Mountain Lake land, if that land is used to produce and sell product, then that land would be subject to to tax. That's my understanding. Yeah,
Do you have a board that oversees the nonprofit?
yes. Makoche Ichupi has a board that they call the Governing Council. And if you look at the Makoche Ichupi website, which is makocheichupi.com, they list all the board members there with, with pictures and a little bit about each of the board members. So Dr. Wazia to me is the executive director, and then there are several people on the board. And that, and the board changes every year. I mean, it's mostly the same people, but there are, one or two new people that come in every year, one or two that rotate off or go off. So like other nonprofit organizations, they have a board, but they call their board a governing council. And they basically use consensus decision-making processes consistent with their Dakota tradition. I don't know, Jill, if you want to cut me off at some point. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to volunteer in February. How do I go about doing that?
Be in touch with me. We may have enough volunteers, but I'm going to give you guys an opportunity here. As I said, this year we are going to be starting a repair community in central Minnesota. So there are people interested, not many, but interested in New London, in Wilmer, and I hope there will be some people here in Hutchinson, which means people here, that might be interested in forming a repair community for Makoche Ichupi. That means that you would, basically the way you sign up is put your email on the list. When you put your email on the list, you will be notified about volunteer work days, about reflection hours. You'll have a chance to participate in the legislative work and in the background campaign. And then you choose what you want to do. So you might say, I really wanted to go to a volunteer work day. So the way you do that, you get on the list, sign your name and email. And I've got a pen. Thank you.
A lot of information to absorb, Thank you so much for the work you're doing. I just am so impressed with everything that's going on in this act of reconciliation and regrowing our relationships is so important. I'm going to ask you all to just stop for a moment again and take a deep breath and breathe in the spirit that is in this place. Offer your own silent prayers for just a moment or two. Gracious and loving God, our hearts are filled, our minds are reeling, our hearts are excited and at the same time grieving, mourning, broken. Some for violence that just won't go away, some for loved ones that are struggling, dying, in need of mental health or physical health. On this morning, especially people who are struggling with seasonal affective disorder are praying for sunshine. For those who are feeling the physical effects of this last lack of sunshine, please know we hold you in the light of Christ. We hold in our hearts this morning transgender youth in Oklahoma who are being denied affirming health care. Please know that we hold you in the light of Christ. Our hearts ache for the shooting victims at the New Lunar Festival in Los Angeles. Please know we hold you in the light of Christ. Are there prayers that need to be lifted that have not been written down this morning? I offer prayers of gratitude for Makoche Chupi and for the ally reparation communities. Please know we hold you in the light of Christ. I also hold in prayer this morning people I met at the border, shelter workers, border agents, and so many volunteers. Please know we hold you in the light of Christ. Loving God, you have heard our prayers. You know the prayers that still remain in the silence of our hearts. Hear us now as we pray together as Jesus taught us to pray. Creator of all that is, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. If you are willing, please stand and let us sing our closing song. We cannot own the sunlit sky. We cannot own the sunlit sky, the moon, the wildflower is growing, for we are part of all that is within life's river flowing. With open hands carry that spirit in your heart and share it generously, that all will know the love of God. Go, and may the peace of Christ go with you. Amen.
We are going to pass the Vaillancourt.
We're passing the basket right now?
Yep.
Okay, if you are interested in supporting Makote Ikichuki financially, we will pass that basket while we sing our final song.
I also put the sign-up sheets on the piano here. If you want to sign up for a repair community, put your email over
Would
there.
they be better back there?
I'll bring it back and say who's got the rules.
The universe is
Here, take 160 acres.
I hear you got a lot of this.
What, do you have an email address?
Yeah, I do.
You want to get information
I like
about
that
the
too.
project?
It is way too small. Yeah, good.